The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for our first client webinar for 2015. I'm Jennifer Campbell. I'm the Online Director for New Lifestyles. As our clients, most of you are very familiar with our offerings from print and online advertising to website creation, email hosting, search engine optimization, and more. But if you ever need information on any of those options, please just let us know. As the years have passed, we noticed less and less marketing people were attending the national and even the regional seminars and meetings due to budget cuts and lack of time. So in an effort to bring our clients even more value for their advertising dollar, we started inviting speakers from these events to present quarterly webinars for our clients. We hope you find them enjoyable and educational, and we always appreciate your feedback on them. So, does your brand speak to today's consumer? Creative Director Rachel Fox and Director of Client Services Adrienne Mansfield-Straub from Sage Age Strategies are here today to discuss creative designs that evoke emotion, the importance of maintaining balance, and what you need for lead generation. So thank you both so much for being here today to share your knowledge with us. I will ask Rachel and Adrienne to tell you a bit more about them and their backgrounds and about Sage Age Strategies in just a moment. But before we get started, a couple quick notes that most of you have heard before. Due to the number of participants on this call, everybody is muted. So if you have a question or if you're experiencing technical difficulties, please type your message into the question or the chat area on the right side of your screen. If it's a technical problem that many are experiencing, we'll address it at that point. But otherwise, we're going to save our questions for the Q&A at the end of the presentation. But that doesn't mean you have to wait to type your questions in. Feel free to go ahead and submit them as you think of them, and we'll get to those in order. As usual, we're recording this session, and we will post it in the client area of our website next week with all of our previous webinars. So that'll be there to share with others. And Adrienne and Rachel have very nicely said that they will share this presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, with anyone who would like a copy. And Adrienne has posted her email here at the end of the presentation, so you can just email her if you'd like a copy of that towards the end. So that is all I have for now. Take it away, ladies.
Thank you. Okay, well, my name is Adrienne, and I am the Director of Client Services, and I'm joined, as Jennifer said, by Rachel Fox, our Creative Director. And today we're going to talk to you about creative that works well for today's consumer, because we know that today's consumer, especially seniors and their adult children, are not the same consumer that we worked with 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They've evolved. They're much more online, they're much more tech savvy, and they're much more engaged in what we're saying, but we have to be very, very careful about what we're saying and how we're saying it. So before we get started, we're going to tell you a little bit about Sage Age Strategies. Sage Age Strategies has been in the senior living industry and the senior healthcare industry for almost 30 years now. One of the things that really sets us apart is that we are comprised of really talented professionals who have a zero learning curve when it comes to this industry. Most of us have been in the industry for 5, 10, 15 years or more. And also recently this year we were awarded Inc. 5000's list of fastest growing private companies in America. So our team is expanding as this market is continuing to expand, and we're building out our organization in those areas that the consumers are requiring, those tech departments and those creative departments that are really in tune with what today's consumers need. So we're going to get started by talking about the importance of evoking emotion. You know, when it comes to our seniors today, we need to understand that they want to create a connection with you. It is not a very linear relationship building process anymore. They're exposed to your brand on multiple platforms, and we need to be capturing their attention in the same way consistently. So when it comes to the actual emotional connection between your brand and the consumer, the idea is that whatever emotion you evoke is going to drive them to act. And we want them to act and continue to act. We want them to, if they've heard of you before, make up their mind. If they're ready to make the move, make that final decision. But moreover, we want to build loyalty, and that's where the emotion really comes in. By creating an emotional connection between your brand and that consumer's lifestyle, you have a connection that they can then use to build off of and start that relationship process. So when it comes to what type of emotions we need to evoke, we need to stay really positive. It's easy to go down a path that we capitalize on their fears or we capitalize on their concerns, but when you're speaking directly to that target audience, they want you to inspire them. They want to be uplifted. They want to be reminded that they are vibrant. They want to engage with you. So we need to focus on creating aspirational messages. And one of the things that a lot of respondents actually said in a recent survey from another industry provider is that less than 20% of the people surveyed indicated that they liked the advertising that attempted to reach them. That's really disconcerting that less than 20% of the people that your ad is appearing before like what they're seeing. And only 31% of those in the survey agreed that they were portrayed realistically. So it's hard to create an emotional connection with an individual who feels already that you don't understand them. More specifically, in a related industry survey, overwhelmingly, the audience rated visuals who were undertaking extreme activities or alternative activities like women on a motorcycle or skydiving as highly disliked. So we have to be sensitive to the fact that we want to be aspirational, but we don't want to be over the top and at that point insulting. So when it comes to creating that emotion, that connection, you do that through your creative and its attempt to solve a problem. So here, as many communities do, we've given you the example of the socialization of seniors. We all know that even those active adults living alone don't get out and get connected the way that they should, and that's why, as communities, we create really vibrant life engagement programs. But I'm going to have Rachel discuss the differences here between these two ads and why one is effective and one is not.
Hi, so we've created a brand name senior living, and we've created a couple different ads for them. The first ad is Your Loved One Lonely. It has a dark picture of a stressed, lonely, worried senior on her own. It has a lot of body copy, and overall it just feels very cold, not very inviting. While ad 2, we've got 3 lovely women who are out shopping or having a good time together, and the ad overall is talking about good times. We're not using negative terminology like Is Your Loved One Lonely. We're talking about the positive aspects of living in this community. We're using less copy. We're creating some extra white space so that it feels a little roomy, not so claustrophobic. And we're using warmer colors and the watermark to kind of have a little more upscale feel to the ad and create more warmth and interest. So overall, ad 1 versus ad 2, ad 1 is more cold, lonely, just as it says, and ad 2 is inspiring hope for the good time.
Absolutely, and this is one of those occasions where, as I said in a recent survey, little more than 1/3 of people surveyed felt that the advertising was people that they could identify with. Well, the challenge here is that if you're talking to, especially an adult child, is your loved one lonely? You don't want to think of your mother as sad and sitting alone and staring out the window. You want to keep her in your mind as a very vibrant woman who still has a lot of good times ahead of her, and Rachel's done a great job here of portraying that. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is creating balance and movement within your artwork. And what's important here is that we've talked a little bit about the emotion we want to invoke, but the next stage of that is how does that translate into the layout itself of your creative? Are you actually, after you made that initial connection, are you moving and are you visually appealing to your target audience? And then from a technical perspective, the balance of an ad is the interpretation of the elements of the design as heavier or lighter and finding a way to make that work in a visually appealing way. And there's different kinds of balance. There's symmetrical balance, asymmetrical balance, and discordant balance. And each of those can be used for a particular reason if you're doing it strategically. And the idea of movement, as I mentioned, is manipulating that balance within the ad and placing those heavier elements in such a way that you're creating the illusion of movement and you're creating eye tracking through the creative all the way down to your ultimate goal, which is the call to action. So the idea here is if you're doing these two things, balance and movement effectively, you're moving the consumer's eye through the creative in a way that feels appealing and feels positive to them and exposes them to the maximum amount of your message. Rachel's going to talk through how she's done that in these three different creative pieces and what's positive about each of them and what's negative.
So here we have brand name senior living again. And the ad on the far left, it doesn't really reflect, it's definitely balanced, but it doesn't really reflect much movement. It's very top to bottom, welcome aboard, all the way down to the call to action. You're not really getting any sort of excitement here. It's pretty much cut and dried. The ad on the far right, a similar situation. It doesn't feel as balanced, but there is movement. So we are guiding the viewer from the image to the headline, to the body copy, to the call to action, which is what you want to do, but it doesn't feel balanced. It doesn't feel right. When you're looking at these items, when you're looking at your ads, in terms of your white space versus your graphics, that is what guides the eye. So the white spaces are sort of like a path they go in between. To ensure that you've got the correct amount of space in between things, it's nice to sort of visualize that you're pouring in handfuls of sand in between the elements. And you want to pour in the same amount of sand in between each element so that it feels right, that it feels good. I know it sounds like a gut reaction, but in reality, when you can see the difference in these three ads, you can kind of see what I mean about pouring the sand in between things. The ad in the middle, of course, is the ad that we would go with that reflects balance and movement. We've got the headline at the top, the wonderful image of the people with the subhead, and then the body copy, and then your call to action. So we're guiding the viewer through the ads that they see what we want them to see in the order that we want them to see it.
Absolutely, and I'd just like to point out also the photo selection on these ads was also very intentional in that in several recent surveys, the highest rated photo by far is of a couple walking hand in hand or embracing one another. So here we've paired that evoking of emotion with a really well-balanced ad that moves your eye throughout the design. So the last component that we're going to talk about today is, does your creative generate leads? Because let's be realistic. When you make the investment into any sort of advertising platform, you expect that you're going to be getting a return on that investment. But many people fail to walk through the entire strategy in their minds to understand the role that the creative plays. They put a lot of time into researching the media. They put a lot of time into negotiating costs. They put a lot of time into strategic placement or scheduling. But they don't invest that same amount of time in ensuring that the creative is going to generate their leads for them. So the idea here is that you've piqued the consumer's interest through the use of evoking emotion and creating balance. But it's up to us as marketers to tell the consumer what we want them to do next. You heard us mention call to action. That call to action is telling the consumer what their next step is in order to continue to interact with your brand, and you're also at that point introducing your preferred method of contact. So again, this takes a lot of upfront planning on your part to identify what it is that you want them to do when you're planning your creative. So there's a lot of ways that seniors can get in touch with us now, and it's important that we take them all into consideration based on the medium and make sure that we're including the right call to action. So do you want them to call if it's a print ad? Do you want them to email you if it's an e-newsletter? Do you want them to visit you online if it's an online advertisement? Do you want them to follow or like you if you're doing this advertising on Facebook or Twitter or Google+. It's important to consider the limitations and the strengths of whatever medium that you're using when you're doing your creative and drafting that call to action. And it's also important to be very specific when you speak to the consumer about the call to action itself. Schedule a personal visit. RSVP for XYZ event. Take advantage of a limited time only incentive. In those cases, we've given them a personalized visit. We've created in their mind the idea that they're going to get some one-on-one attention from you. When RSVPing for the event, we're reinforcing that there's a limited number of seats and we want them to reserve theirs. And when taking advantage of an incentive, you really want to focus on creating a sense of urgency, limited time only, ends XYZ date, and really take advantage of including that as you focus on your call to action. So here, Rachel has, again, given us two beautiful designs, both in this case advertising the same event, but with a very different approach to the call to action.
Yes, again, we have brand name Senior Living. This time they're having a spring open house. And as you can see on ad 1, that the call to action, well, you probably can't see it. It's very small. It's buried in the copy. And it just says call today. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what we want them to do and the phone number. There's nothing, it's not right there. If you're looking at ad 2, similarly, we've used all of our ideas of balance and the amount of copy to use and the type of imagery to use and the warmth in the ad. And we've guided everyone down to the bottom where it says, your future is blooming with possibilities. Call name at phone number today. This is another way of making it a very personalized message. They know who they're going to be speaking to. Whether it's an event you want them responding to the activities director or you want them calling in directly to someone in sales, they will know who's going to be on the other end of the line when they're calling. They at least have their name. So just by doing that, it feels more personal that, you know, I'm going to be talking to Adrian later today about this event. I'm going to call Adrian to go talk about the spring open house. So again, we've used all of our principles here, but the main point on this is that you have this strong call to action that you can see. It's not very plain as far as just call today or call to schedule. It's your future is blooming with possibilities.
As Rachel said, that's a very aspirational message. That's going back to, as we talked about in the very beginning, the idea that we want them to know that we understand that they've got a future full of possibilities. That is the connection that you're making for them with that call to action. And again, Rachel said it beautifully. The idea of a name when they're calling to speak with someone gives them the idea that they've already started to build a relationship with you. When you call someone and you pick up the phone and you say, I'd like to speak with Rachel, you've already built a relationship because you're on a first name basis. So there's a lot of value there as well. We wanted to keep today's presentation brief and concise so that we had lots of time for questions and we're sensitive to everybody's time. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, you're welcome to email me, Adrian, at sageagestrategies.com, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, ladies. Great information. I know I'll be passing it along to lots of our advertisers and taking it into account as we create our ads as well. So thank you. I am waiting here to see if some questions come in. You must have done a great job because nobody's asked anything so far.
This is information that takes time to digest and really understand, and so we're available in the future if anybody has specific questions that they'd like to discuss on a one-off basis.
Well, thank you. Here's one that's come in. Do you have any other tips on images and colors that work well?
Oh, yes, definitely. The imagery, we are in advertising, and we do want we want images that look realistic, but at the same time, we want them to be fresh, and we want them to be exciting and hopeful and inspiring and fun. A lot of imagery that we find that works, like Adrian said, are the couples who look loving. maybe aren't looking at the camera. Maybe they're looking at each other instead. The grandparents interacting with their grandchildren, multi-generational imagery, and interacting in ways that are fun. Maybe they're cooking together, maybe they're gardening together, just something that shows, some activity. I know in some areas there are some communities that can't use alcoholic images and things of that nature, but sometimes we have wine events, when you can actually show a senior who looks like they're having a blast with a glass of wine, having fun, hanging out with their friends like they're 22 years old again. It's brilliant.
And in terms of colors, I mean, Rachel is the queen of the palette, but the idea is that you want to stay relatively within your brand palette, but there's a lot of opportunity to introduce accent colors that really serve to move the eye and serve to highlight specific areas that you want to draw attention to. So, for example, we have worked with clients who had a relatively muted, more neutral color palette in the greens and tans and browns. If we really wanted to call attention to something, a nice scarlet stripe or a nice orange stripe can complement that, call attention without creating a discordant feel to the color palette overall.
Yeah, you want to add on to that brand, not to take away from it. Your brand colors are important. They are recognizable. But there's no reason that you can't add something additional to it. And maybe you change it seasonally. Maybe you change it, for a different series of ads. Maybe your event ads have one color that is your accent color, and your incentive ads have a different accent color, things of that nature.
But that really brings in, as Rachel said, the idea that as you do your seasonal planning or your quarterly planning, just as you're selecting your media, just as you're selecting your event topics, you're taking the time to really identify how that strategically ties into your creative.
Great, ladies. Thank you. Adrienne, we have a few people that are just on the phone with us that aren't able to connect through their computers. Could you actually give them, repeat your email there for them?
Absolutely. My email address is Adrienne, ADRIENNE, at SAGE, SAGE, AGE, strategies, STRATEGIES.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Someone's asking here for sources for good photos.
Sources for good photos. There's a lot of great sources out there. You have to be careful. You have to be careful when you're looking for your sources that they're not rights protected, things of that nature. 123RF is something we've used from time to time. iStock Photo is something we use from time to time. ThinkStock, it has a good subscription program.
Your community and your events are a great place to start when it comes to event-oriented photos. If you, as Rachel said, if you do a regular wine tasting evening, once a quarter, and you know that that's a part of your consistent plan, absolutely take the time and make the investment to hire a good photographer to come out and take advantage of getting some great action shots. And just remember to follow up with making sure that everybody who attended signed some sort of photo release. But the idea there, if you're doing a great life engagement program like that first ad that we showed you, if you have a great life engagement program, take the time to invite a photographer in and get some great shots of your residents actually doing what they do. Because just as the individual is going to see it when they come into your community to tour, and you're going to bring them in and show them an event that's going on, some life engagement programming activity, you want to be able to show them that in the advertising as well and start that process.
Yeah, there really is nothing better than actual images set within the community. I know not every community is able to do that, but even if you do images without people in them and use them within the pieces as accent images, things of that nature, there's really nothing better because no one else will have that same image. That's the one drawback to using stock imagery is that it's stock imagery. It exists. Anyone can buy it.
Very good. All right. Someone's asking how to make black and white images or ads more appealing.
Black and white images and ads. That can be very, very tough depending on where they're running and what media they're running in. Something that I do is I try to cut down as much clutter as I possibly can, and I run it. I take the images into Photoshop and I change the brightness and contrast so that they almost don't look good. I know that sounds funny, but the way that they reproduce in the media looks better. So you have to almost overexpose the images. And then as far as the content of the ad itself, you can use some grays and things, but you're not going to go very dark. You want to stay 50% or below because everything does reproduce darker. I try to stay away from background imagery, things like that. I really rely heavily on my capabilities of typography, and I really rely heavily on the image that we're using, and really try to keep the ad as free of clutter and keep the copy down as much as I can.
Great. Okay, next question is, how did you come up with the idea that movement causes higher CTAs?
Just to clarify that statement a little bit, effective use of movement draws more attention to your call to action. The more attention your call to action receives, the higher level of engagement you're going to get from that call to action. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about that. The idea here is that the more times you can get the phone to ring, the higher the likelihood you're going to get a tour, the higher the likelihood you're going to get a move-in. So the idea is when you're creating advertising, focusing as much of your attention as you can on a clear, concise, effective call to action and making it visually prominent, because that's what ultimately leads to sales.
Okay, great. When dealing with small ads where there is less room, do you have any suggestions on how to best capitalize on the limited space?
Website. You really want to have, I know I do it all the time where we have ads that are the size of a business card and sometimes smaller. And you can really only fit maybe the logo, the phone number, the website. Your website, we say it here every day, your website is your best looking employee. So the way that you can make that ad really count is to drive the traffic to your website and give them all the information there.
I'm writing that one down.
We've also found it extremely effective, as Rachel mentioned, your best looking salesperson, and as we've briefly discussed ROI over the course of this call, taking the time to do personalized URLs, pearls or vanity URLs, so that you can quantify the traffic you're getting on each of your advertising sources, and just the same, utilizing vanity and tracking phone numbers, so that you can really get a better gauge, more than a perception, on how each advertising medium is working for you, and that's going to help you in the future decide if maybe it's time to increase that ad size.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. What is your recommendation on how often to change a direct mail piece? Often I think we get tired of seeing the same pieces, but clients probably do not. Your thoughts?
So I guess I'm curious if it's something that's being printed, if it's something that's being printed at a very large quantity and mailed out to the same list over and over again. We don't do that very often here. We usually do specific creative for the specific mail list each time. So we have a client that runs them maybe quarterly. We have another client that will run them, a couple of months. And it's completely new creative each time.
There's a lot of value in that. There's also a little bit of value as, sometimes it's beneficial to have a consistent look, and I think that may be something that's worth discussing, a consistent look or an overall, I don't want to use the word template, but an overall skeleton to get started with, and then customizing it for each event. Yeah. You want to have some measure of consistency, but you also want to have some measure of interest. Yeah. So it's really striking that balance.
Yeah, if they see the same exact thing every time, unfortunately it's just going to get pitched. But even if you're just moving things around a little bit, it could be this. It could be a very similar message. It could be a very similar, maybe even the layout similar. But maybe a fresh photo. Put it on the left instead of the right. Small changes that stay within what you feel is your brand can make a big difference.
Great. I think you've pretty much already addressed this one, but I'll throw it out there just in case you have anything to add. This is, how do you suggest structuring a small ad, example 5 by 5 inches, to effectively get your message across without using too much text?
A 5 by 5 ad is it's relatively small, but it's not the smallest. A 5 by 5 ad. Some of the examples that we showed you on this PowerPoint showed the difference between using a lot of copy and using a little bit of copy and some bullets. Bullets can be fantastic to really help you get your point across of what you have to offer without doing a whole lot of text, because you don't have to have full sentences for bullets. They're bullet points. So if you maybe had an intro sentence, 2 or 3 bullets, a nice picture, your logo, beautiful call to action, you could probably get your point across pretty well in a 5 by 5 ad, even including all those things.
All right. The next question is kind of who to aim these ads at, what demographic and socioeconomic levels. Is it usually, should we aim for the spouses, the children, or the loved ones giving the care, age and income? Are there any patterns that you've noticed or anything they need to aim for?
Here's what I would say about that. It really depends on the service level that you're promoting. When you're talking independent living, CCRC, that level, active adult communities, you're talking to the prospect themselves. And so you need to be sensitive that you're not placing that in such a way that their adult children, your loved one, and you're talking about an independent living facility, that could be considered really offensive. Conversely, when you're talking about assisted living and memory care, you're talking directly to the adult child. I would say 8.5 times out of 10. That other 1.5 times is the spouse. And in those cases, you have to be very specific and say, not your loved one, but your spouse. Yeah. In terms of overall demographics, that's really going to be driven by your market. Every market is a little bit different. I just did some research recently just within the Philadelphia area, going down to Wilmington versus going up towards the Poconos. There is a vast, vast difference in, age, income, home value that we need to take into consideration. And when I say age, I mean the age of the individuals moving into the community. Some places experience a higher level of acuity and a younger move-in age, and some see a higher level of frailty and a later move-in age. It's all going to be contingent on really taking the time to look into your market and look into your database. If the majority of the contacts that you have at your memory care assisted living community are spouses, then that's who you need to talk to specifically, and you need to tailor your message and your images that way. Whereas if you're looking at your independent living community and the majority are the seniors themselves, that drives you in the correct direction right there.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for all the information today. Lots of great stuff. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your business and for your feedback. Look for our invitation for the next webinar. That will be in May. So everyone have a great day, and thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.